In 2005, the Tales series of Bandai Namco JRPGs was going strong. Starting in 1995 with the Super Famicom title Tales of Phantasia, this action JRPG franchise had released numerous titles on the PS1 and PS2, along with the defining GameCube title Tales of Symphonia. While not as legendary as Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, the series was still popular worldwide, with most of the mainline releases getting localized in English. After developing nearly 10 titles in 10 years, and evolving the franchise across console generations from 2D PS1 sprites to 3D PS2 models, the development team, named Tales Development Studio, was ready to try something different. After they completed Tales of Abyss in 2005, the team wanted to develop their next title for next-gen hardware, as they felt they had done everything they could on the PS2. At that time, only the Xbox 360 had been revealed, and while the Tales series was most at home on the PlayStation, details about the next Sony console hadn't been released yet. The decision to begin working on the Xbox 360 was further supported by the console's international success. While the console wasn't exactly making waves in Japan, and in fact it never would, the team was still interested in reaching a larger and wider audience. This was the first Tales game to be localized during production rather than after the fact, meaning the North American version could release in the same month as the Japanese version. At that time, it was pretty standard for games to release in other countries months or even years after their initial domestic release. This would be a huge step forward for the Tales series. When Tales of Vesperia released on the Xbox 360 in 2008 in both Japan and America, it became a relatively huge success in its home country. It was the second best-selling game on the Xbox 360 in Japan. Its release also boosted 360 sales in Japan, and while it still never became as popular as the Wii or the PlayStation 3, Vesperia turned many Japanese players into Xbox 360 owners. While I can't really verify the sales numbers of Tales of Vesperia in America, I do remember seeing the box for it everywhere and seeing a lot of reviews posted online. At the time, the Tales series was one I'd never really heard of, but Vesperia was getting a lot of attention in America. Out of the small number of JRPGs released on the Xbox 360, this was the only one that I had heard really any positive things about at the time. While the other games were considered middling at best, Vesperia received universally glowing praise. I had tried and failed to beat Eternal Sonata, but Tales of Vesperia actually held my attention for its 50-hour campaign. I actually distinctly remember beating it while I was on a beach trip with my family. I'd gotten a horrible sunburn that led to blisters on my shoulders, so I had to stay inside, and well, I just so happened to bring my 360 on the trip. So I made my way through the last parts of the game, and while I don't remember anything from the ending, I do remember feeling pretty satisfied by the adventure overall. By the time I decided to work on this project, Bandai Namco had released a definitive edition of Vesperia on modern consoles, which included content never seen in the West. This included 2 new playable characters and many new items and skits, which were once exclusive to the PS3 release that itself was exclusively released in Japan in 2009. For this review, I'll be playing the remastered version on the Nintendo Switch, though I do have experience playing it on the original hardware, and besides, the remaster doesn't change the fact that Vesperia is an extremely solid and lovingly crafted JRPG. Tales of Vesperia takes place on a fictional world called Terra Luminis, where humans struggle to survive against an endless horde of monsters. To protect themselves and the many cities across the land, humans use the power of Blastia to create massive barriers. You can think of Blastia as devices that can harness the elemental power of the world and can be manipulated to heal the injured, attack your enemies, and much more. Our story begins when a mysterious figure steals the Blastia controlling the water in the slums of the Empire's capital, Zaphias. With water access cut off in the lower quarter, our main character Yuri Lowell steps up to find the thief. Yuri is a swordsman with a rigid sense of morality and a cocky, laid-back attitude. He never comes off as naive or arrogant, more like he wants to do things his way.
You're not seriously thinking of going to Mississippi? some Mario's place, are ya?
The Royal Quarter? Me? I wouldn't be caught dead going to a place like that. It gives me the creeps.
Damn it, Yuri! Just because you can do a few tricks with that bony Blastia, you think you're invincible.
Plus, his best friend is the sword-wielding dog Rapide. What's not to love? During his search, Yuri is thrown in jail, but manages to escape. And while sneaking around the castle, he runs into Estelle, the princess of the Empire, who's also trying to escape and find Flynn, one of the Imperial Knights and longtime friend/rival of Yuri. Estelle and Yuri decide to work together so they can find Flynn and the Blastia thief. Their quest takes them across the world where they encounter new party members, like the Blastia researcher Rita.
It's up to you. Go to jail, make a run for it, or follow me. Pick one.
The fledgling monster hunter Carol.
You didn't think I was that strong, did you?
The mysterious veteran Raven.
Hey, you don't really think my story stinks that bad, do ya?
Yeah, the stench is sort of coming off you in waves.
Really?
The aloof Blastia hunter Judith.
How should I put it? He's the perfect elder for weird people.
And the childlike pirate Patty.
I was hunting for treasure when I fell into the ocean, but a nice monster came to play with me.
What begins as a simple story to catch a thief slowly becomes a globe-trotting adventure full of political intrigue, expansive ancient histories, and even some moral quandaries to spice things up. Vesperia's narrative has a distinct three-act structure, where each act of the story has a main villain that's defeated by the end before a larger threat is revealed. This structure works to keep the narrative moving, but I did find that it hurts the middle portion, where you've defeated the villain, but the party has to kinda flounder around for a bit, while the next villain is set up and revealed. During this section of the game, I honestly found it difficult to get invested in the various threads that were being spun. These range from discovering Estelle's mysterious destiny, Carol and Yuri's attempts to start a guild, and finding out the true nature of the Intellikeia, ancient creatures that are dotted across the land. While I still liked each of the characters and I looked forward to their scenes together, the overall story started to feel padded out. Once the villain makes their appearance in the second act and the tension starts to ramp up, I was truly back on board until the finale. When I found myself bored with the main plot, there were always individual character stories to keep me going. These various threads help to flesh out the themes of the game and create some interesting dynamics. One of my favorites was between Yuri and Flynn, old friends and friendly rivals.
Whoa, hold on! What are you doing?
Yuri, I'm happy to see you're finally seeing the world outside the barrier.
So, be a little more happy then. Stop pointing that thing at me.
Well, I got a little less happy when I saw this.
Hey, it's up to 10,000 gold. Nice.
They both have a dream to change the way the world works, to fix society so there's less corruption and pain for the less fortunate. Yet they both choose their own way to dispense the same version of justice and fairness. Flynn joins the military and works his way up, enforcing the existing laws so he can be promoted and fix things from the inside. On the other hand, Yuri leaves the military soon after joining and dispenses personal justice, working more as a vigilante. Some of the best conversations involve Yuri and Flynn, or the other characters questioning their decisions and morals. Yuri has a strong moral compass, but his methods are selfish and can hurt others if he's not thinking. He's also impatient and distant, choosing to go in alone rather than rely on anyone else for help. Flynn is just as frustrated and stubborn as Yuri, but he believes deeply in the power he's invested in and works to help others within the military see his side and believe in him.
The laws have always been the tools of whoever happens to hold all the chips.
Just saying that doesn't make it right for individuals to judge right from wrong, or for you to operate your own private court of law. If the laws are at fault, then fixing those laws comes first.
But you can't deny that lives were saved because those bastards were put down. You'd rather tell those people, sorry you have to die today, I promise we'll change things soon.
What I appreciate is that by the end, the game doesn't say one person is right and the other is wrong, rather they both need to grow and improve, ultimately finding a middle ground between action and empathy. This is just one example of how Vesperia's characters have more going on below the surface. While no one is portrayed in a groundbreaking way, with the game often relying on some anime and JRPG tropes, each character's story is done extremely well. While I may not have been interested in every aspect of the narrative, I quickly got wrapped up in the party as a whole and wanted to see them finish their journey. More than any other game I've covered in this series, I really fell in love with these characters. A big part of that comes from the heavy focus on characterization and their interactions. Each member of your party is distinct and memorable, from Estelle's fish out of water narrative and internal conflict about her heritage, to Carol's childish mishaps and growth into a dedicated leader. Every party member has a few special moments and engaging narratives running alongside the overall plot, so while I often got lost in the sauce of the story, I could always ground myself with what was going on with Yuri and the gang. I'm particularly a fan of Raven, whose character arc I find truly fascinating. He starts as a mysterious, charismatic, hopeless romantic that tags along on our journey from time to time. But once we get more involved in the war between the guilds and the Empire, he becomes a more prominent member. His past of fighting in the Great War comes up sometimes, showing that there's more to this old man than meets the eye. Eventually, we get the reveal that he's the legendary Captain Schwan we've heard so much about, working as a spy for the Empire to check on the guilds. While Raven is laid back and world-weary, Schwan is battle-hardened and noble, standing on the same level as Alexei in terms of rank and recognition. Schwan took orders his whole life and followed the whims of people more powerful than him. That is until he met the Dawn, the head of all of the guilds, who he was spying on and who also believed in Raven and encouraged him. Now Raven has two personalities. One tied to the Empire thanks to his Blastia heart keeping him alive, and another tied to the Dawn and the guilds, grateful for the freedom and support. Once Schwan dies, Raven is the only part left, and this part is determined to stop Alexei from abusing his powers, a lesson Raven had to learn the hard way. While Raven started as a character that I liked, he grew to be someone I really cared about across the journey. It's the little moments over the course of the game that add up, most of which come from the skits sprinkled throughout. These minor cutscenes serve a variety of purposes throughout the adventure. They can add extra details to important moments, react to new powers or items, or just offer lighthearted conversations to break up the dungeons. I always looked forward to these scenes, which are fully voice acted despite having limited animation. These skits fill a gap that I often find in JRPGs, where we don't get enough quiet moments to simply be with the characters and see how they interact with each other. I always want to see their small conversations or have them discuss the plot so far, but these conversations can take time and money away from the other aspects of the game. It's difficult to fit them into a normal development schedule. The Tales series has found a nice balance with these skits, using simple cutscenes to show these interactions without sacrificing the overall narrative or pacing. Plus, they're completely optional, so anyone not interested isn't forced to sit through them. In general, Tales of Vesperia is a very lively and vibrant game. The characters are very expressive, especially for a 7th gen JRPG. In combat, everyone has flashy attacks and a character-specific phrase to go with their moves. Outside of battle, the characters emote with their anime faces, while their body animations can be a bit stiff at times. Some scenes can be a bit awkward because of this, but the emotions still come across thanks to the stellar voice acting. The English voice cast is made up of gaming and anime legends, including Troy Baker, Sam Riegel, Michelle Ruff, Laura Bailey, and many more. They all bring the characters to life and sell the funny or goofy moments just as well as the dramatic or emotional moments. By including their performances in most of the cutscenes and all of the skits, every single party member feels more animated and relatable. The only jarring moments come from the additional content introduced in the PS3 port. Patty wasn't in the original game, so they had to include her in cutscenes and record new dialogue to account for that. Troy Baker didn't come back to voice Yuri, and his replacement, Grant George, is quite jarring. I don't think he's doing a bad job, but his voice is often inserted in the middle of conversations, switching from Baker to him and back again. It can make for a very awkward transition, especially in the middle of cutscenes.
This is crazy! Where are all these monsters coming from? The barrier disappeared when the monsters attacked. It can't be a coincidence that they happened at the same time, can it?
Along with the individual characters, the world itself is quite vibrant thanks to the way it changes throughout the story, in response to major events. These changes can range from small things like new objects in the overworld, to larger changes like new battle music or even entire areas being blocked off and even new ones being revealed. Vesperia is able to feel like a true adventure, similar to older globe-trotting JRPGs from the Super Nintendo and PlayStation 1 eras. This feeling comes from the dynamic world, traveling across continents in an overworld, and an in-depth lore and history explored throughout the long journey. The game length also feels like an adventure, clocking in at 50 hours at least and closer to 70 hours if you include side content. While the length is mostly earned through character dialogue and a variety of side activities, the plot can still drag at points, especially in the second act. Tales of Vesperia takes place in a fictional world that has an ancient history and a natural logic all its own. While it's easy to understand the broad strokes of a group of friends banding together to stop a world-destroying evil, the minute details are often a bit convoluted. There's talk of air, that's AER, which functions closer to mana or life force than the oxygen we breathe in reality. There's air crenes, Entelecheia, Blastias, Blastia formulas, spirits, and even their own versions of mana that's not like other JRPGs' versions of mana, but is also different from air. It can get real confusing. The amount of unique phrases thrown around is overwhelming, especially for a game this long where the plot often diverts either for character backstories or to explore the inner workings of this made-up logic. While the characters spout off techno-babble dialogue about releasing an air formula so the air crene won't release too much air and harm the Entelecheia until they turn into an apatheia, I would oftentimes be completely lost. But whenever I made it through these humps, the plot would get back on track and there would still be fun character moments throughout these slower parts. Plus, I was always trying to learn my way through Vesperia's unique action-based combat.
Oh man. Alright.
Tales of Vesperia's combat is action-based instead of turn-based, with the player performing combos and making decisions in real time rather than taking the time to choose options in a menu. This active combat system has been a staple of the series since its beginning on the Super Nintendo, and has been expanded in every game since. Rather than controlling the entire party in turn-based battles, the player controls one character and can issue general commands to each character, like telling them to defend or target a single enemy. You also have the option to go into a menu during combat and tell a character what attack to perform or item to use, yet this slows down combat to the point where it isn't effective and is more useful in special situations. While the action takes place on a linear 2D plane, the characters and enemies can still move three-dimensionally in order to dodge attacks or reach someone who's out of the way. Because of this active battle system, Vesperia often feels less like a traditional JRPG and more like a beat-em-up or fighting game. The player can perform simple combos and chain them into special moves, they can knock enemies into the air or down the ground, they can block, parry, and even backstep to dodge attacks. The combat isn't as complicated or stylish as something like Devil May Cry, and it's not as sluggish or direct as something like Streets of Rage. Rather, the encounters are a happy medium between the two, allowing for engaging combat that's easily customizable. Player choice is a huge aspect of Vesperia's combat. Each character has their own playstyle, special attacks, and equipable skills that can change the way you play. You can choose which special attacks to map to your controller, along with a second set of attacks mapped to the right stick. By chaining these special moves together, you can perform some devastating combos that help speed up the fights. Skills are usually learned from armor and weapons, requiring the character to use the equipment while earning points until they permanently learn the skills and can equip it whenever they like. These skills can range from health and mana boost to evolving your special attacks and allowing for longer combos. For players wanting to fully control their team and push the mechanics to their limits, or anyone looking to mix things up a little bit, Vesperia allows plenty of user control. Feeling tired of playing as Yuri? Why not try Rita's powerful spell casting or Judith's air combos? Mix and match party lineups to see who works well together and even see unique battle end screens depending on who fought in the battle.
We need something nice.
Let's let in one of the girls.
That means you're out, Raven.
No.
This is also where the characterization shines, with each party member having unique attacks and stylish animations. Whenever they learn a new special attack, the battle pauses to show off the cool skill or funny interaction. For someone like Estelle, she learns spells that heal or buff the party using sparkly effects and ethereal ghosts that run around the battlefield. For Patty's mode-switching gameplay, she goes from gambling in cards to risk her attack power to cooking meals that damage enemies. This makes it rewarding to switch up your party and see how everyone plays off each other or what new attacks and skills they'll unlock. While there are so many options available to the player, I found it reassuring to know that you can still get through the game without getting into the weeds of these systems. Personally, I played most of the game as Yuri, while using a basic set of combos and was able to get through encounters and still experience some challenging bosses here and there. I only dabbled in the deeper mechanics, but I'm still impressed with the game's ability to appeal equally to more casual players who want to enjoy the story, and more hardcore players who really want to exploit the combat and character strengths. While the extensive customization options are a positive, I also feel like it introduces way too many mechanics into the game. I often found myself having to look up how certain attacks worked, like the mystic arts, or how to incorporate cooking into my strategies. The game does attempt to explain these mechanics, but I found the text blurbs and character dialogue a bit lacking. At times it can really feel overwhelming, especially when the guidebook that explains these mechanics is a tad disorganized. The game is still enjoyable without diving into the various systems, but it's still a shame that I can't easily learn more about how cooking works or how to pull off a mystic art without reading a GameFAQs forum post from 2009. In general, Tales of Vesperia suffers from outdated design decisions that make the experience a bit cumbersome. These can range from a lack of town or continent names on the minimap, or a cohesive quest guide to help remember what your next task is, or what side quests you're following. The gameplay outside of combat is also fairly standard and can feel repetitive. After the first few hours, you'll understand the routine of visiting a new town, talking with NPCs, advancing the story towards a new dungeon, traversing the overworld, and scouring the dungeons before fighting a boss. This style of JRPG gameplay is still used today, and for good reason as it's effective, but I still wish there was more going on in the traversal itself to make it more engaging. While none of these choices completely destroy the game's enjoyment, they do add up over the lengthy 50 to 70 hour playtime. Because the game is so long, I found myself losing track of what some of the terms and technobabble meant. While I could easily remember how the characters had grown through the journey, I wasn't always clear on what certain things were. Overall, I'm a bit disappointed in the narrative's heavy use of technical terms and exposition about past events we can't experience. Because at the heart of Vesperia, there are interesting themes and an engaging story. Hidden beneath the ancient creatures and magic orbs is a story about climate change and the way society responds to a slow but calamitous event. While nature and the ancient beings, known as the Intellicheia, rage against the changing world and its loss of air, humanity is busy focused on their petty fights and internal struggles. The Empire is at war with the guilds, leaders are backstabbing each other for power, and millions more are just trying to survive as the world itself comes apart at the seams. While people like military commander Alexei and pirate captain Barbaros gain power over people and land, there's a larger threat looming just beyond the sky that no one can control or even predict. The Autophagos is a cosmic power, a being and a force of nature that will devour the world. It's hard hard to not see it as the physical manifestation of climate change, as it literally breaks through a barrier surrounding the planet in order to fill the world with toxic gas. The metaphors may be obvious, but they are effective when discussed by these characters we've grown to love. It's another example of Vesperia doing something fairly standard, but doing it extremely well, to the point where I'm invested in these conversations despite them being a little cliched. I also think this simplicity and straightforwardness is a strength of the game's narrative. It's easy to understand, which allows the characters to explore more complex emotions and growth. And while I wouldn't say the characters here are overly complex, there's still plenty to grab onto and think about, like with Yuri and Flynn's dynamic, Raven's double life, and Patty's personal struggle with reality and their heritage. I think the best way to describe Vesperia is that it's a solid JRPG. It tackles familiar themes like the power of friendship, rebelling against destiny, finding courage in the darkness, etc. If you've played a few JRPGs or watched some shonen anime, you won't be surprised by any of the developments here. What the game excels at are the details within these themes and narratives. Many of the characters appear straightforward on the surface. Yuri is the cocky hero, Estelle is the wafy princess, Rita the agitated genius, so on and so forth. But there's so much more than these first impressions, and the fun of the game is discovering these greater details. That's why the skits are such a large and enjoyable part of the game. That's why the combat focuses on individual character abilities. That's why so much time is spent with these characters and interacting with each other. It all comes together to create a true sense of adventure, a feeling that I haven't seen achieved as well on the Xbox 360 up to this point. Vesperia is a JRPG made for fans of the genre, and it succeeds at almost everything it sets out to do. The combat is fun and engaging, the narrative is needlessly complicated yet understandable in the broad strokes, the characters are lovable. Yet, it never phones in these aspects. It's made with love for the genre, a love for these characters, and a love for the world that's created. As an Xbox 360 JRPG, it's the gold standard from critics and audiences. Unfortunately, that means there isn't a ton to talk about or analyze, but it also makes it easy to recommend for anyone interested in the genre. Whether you're a veteran or a newcomer, Tales of Vesperia is a perfect starting point, especially with the definitive edition available on every modern console and PC. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. Be sure to give it a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments. This video took a lot longer to make than I was initially planning, but that's due to the fact that I was moving and had some major changes in my life. But now that it's finally done, I'm going to move on to the Square Enix 360 JRPG Infinite Undiscovery, so be sure to subscribe so you know when the next part in the series is released. Once again, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.